inherited this fiscal situation that I believe.
Well, you inherited from Donald Trump, who was here. You did, Mr. Bessent.
No,
yes,
sir.
you did, Mr. Bessent.
No,
you inherited from Donald Trump. He's the first president to come back after a 4-year hiatus, after we know exactly what the last tax cuts did, which was blow a massive hole in our deficit and debt. You can't sit here and lie about that. It's true. The data to you.
Welcome back to Freedom Forge. If you believe in truth, accountability, and standing up for common sense policies, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned, because today we're breaking down a Senate hearing that exposes a lot more than the mainstream media wants you to see. Now let's get into it. This Senate hearing revolves around a heated exchange between a U.S. Senator and the Treasury Secretary over federal spending, tax policy, and the growing national debt. The core issue being debated is whether recent and proposed tax cuts, combined with spending decisions, are helping the American people or pushing the country deeper into financial trouble.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for coming in today. And thanks for having this hearing. Secretary Bessent, the last time you were here, I asked you about your emphasis on domestic discretionary funding in your opening statement. You had stated, quote, "We must adjust federal domestic discretionary spending to get our fiscal house in order while striking an urgent tone on our growing deficit." I mentioned to you then that domestic discretionary spending is only 15% of our budget. And I think if you were serious about deficit reduction, you might not push for tax cuts that almost certainly could not be offset by discretionary adjustments alone. And now, of course, we know you can't. Today, we actually have the details of your plan. Take health care from 10 million Americans, 126,000 Coloradans. Cut nutrition assistance for millions of adults. Sunset clean energy investments that are so critical to the American West. Give over 40% of the tax benefits of this bill to the top 5%. And it's not even close to being paid for. Even my colleagues on the Republican side, who for years and years and years have claimed to be the fiscally responsible party, now are admitting that it's not paid for. This bill adds another $2.4 trillion to our national debt. It will push the deficit to GDP ratio up to 7%, which you said when you were here before was unsustainable, far from the 3% target that you described. If you look at your proposals taken together, there is no getting around the fact. There is no getting around the fact that the richest Americans receive an average tax cut of $300,000, which, again, we're not paying for with the discretionary cuts that you advertise. So once again, we will have to borrow money in order to assist the people in this country who least need a tax cut at this moment, while the Americans who have been made miserable by the economy that they're in actually see income reduced because of cuts to Medicaid and cuts to SNAP. Meanwhile, and I think, Mr. Chairman, this is really important, meanwhile, interest rates are at 20-year highs. Moody's has slashed our credit rating because of the fiscal irresponsibility of this administration. The World Bank has cut our growth estimates in half, and the bond markets are screaming at us to stop. We now pay, and we are paying this year, more in interest than we are in the national defense. Secretary Bessent, how can you square your concern with fiscal health with deficit finance growth for families that need those tax cuts least?
Senator, I'll begin with that we did not get here. We inherited this fiscal situation that I believe.
Well, you inherited from Donald Trump, who was here. You did, Mr. Besson.
No,
yes,
sir.
you did, Mr.
No,
Besson.
sir.
You inherited from Donald Trump. He's the first president to come back after a 4-year hiatus, after we know exactly what the last tax cuts did, which was blow a massive hole in our deficit and debt. You can't sit here and lie about that. It's true. The data, to coin a phrase, the data shows that that's the result. The math shows that that is the result. No one on this side of the aisle admits anymore that or claims anymore that they didn't blow a huge hole in the deficit. They did. And now you're here saying to the American people, let's double down on that. We're going to give tax cuts for the wealthy. We are going to give tax cuts again to the wealthiest people in America, and we are going to finance it on the backs of the sons and daughters of teachers and firefighters and police officers all over this country, because we can't pay for it. Because the Treasury Secretary discovered somehow that domestic discretionary spending is only 15% of the budget, and therefore you can't balance it there.
Well, sir, we had a referendum on November 5th.
You certainly did. I agree with
policies. Your side lost.
I agree with that.
And a higher decibel
And
level.
I'm a rare Democrat who doesn't blame Donald Trump for winning. I'm sad he won. I don't blame him for winning. But don't come here.
In your statements,
go ahead.
They
Mr.
have
Secretary.
veracity.
Go ahead, Mr. Secretary. What?
Higher decibel level does not give your statements more veracity.
My statements are true, if that's the word, if that's what you mean by veracity. My statements are true. You blew a massive hole in the deficit when your predecessor was sitting here under Donald Trump. And so the question is, can't we think of something better to do with the money than this debt, than drive up interest rates by borrowing money from our kids so the richest people in America can get a tax cut when they don't need it? That is the reality of your plan.
Well, sir, actually the high interest rates were achieved during the Biden administration in October of 2023, and we have not touched those rates since then. So
the high interest rates.
No, your statement's incorrect.
I'm out of time, and I appreciate the indulgence of the chairman.
Thank you, Senator.
What we just witnessed in that hearing is exactly what happens when politics takes center stage over facts. You had a senator making a very emotional argument, claiming that tax cuts, especially those that benefit higher earners, are the root of America's fiscal problems. But let's slow down and actually think this through. The argument being pushed is that giving tax relief, particularly to the top earners, somehow automatically harms the rest of the country. That sounds good in a political speech, but it ignores a key reality. Economic growth doesn't come from punishing success. It comes from incentivizing it. What the senator conveniently glosses over is that government spending, not tax cuts, is the real driver of the national debt. When you hear numbers like trillions being added to the deficit, the question shouldn't just be who got a tax break. It should be, why is the government spending so much money in the first place? And here's where it gets even more interesting. The senator pointed out that domestic discretionary spending is only about 15% of the budget. That's actually true. But instead of using that as a reason to rethink massive entitlement programs or wasteful spending elsewhere, the argument becomes, raise taxes or don't cut them at all. That's not fiscal responsibility. That's avoidance. Let's talk about the claim that these policies take health care from millions and cut nutrition assistance. These are powerful talking points, but they're designed to trigger emotion rather than encourage understanding. Reforming spending programs is not the same as abandoning people. There's a difference between making a system sustainable and letting it collapse under its own weight. And then there's the repeated idea that tax cuts only benefit the wealthy. That's another oversimplification. When businesses and higher earners keep more of their income, they invest, expand, and create jobs. That's how economies grow. You don't build a strong middle class by weakening the engines that drive job creation. Now, the senator also brought up interest rates, credit ratings, and global economic outlooks, trying to tie all of that directly to tax policy. But here's the reality. Those factors are influenced by a combination of inflation, monetary policy, and overall government spending, not just whether someone got a tax cut. And when the Treasury Secretary responded, you could see the real divide. One side is saying, we inherited a difficult situation, while the other is saying, your policies made it worse. That back and forth is classic Washington. But what's missing is accountability across the board. Both parties have contributed to the debt. Both have approved massive spending bills. And yet, when it comes time to fix the problem, the debate turns into finger-pointing instead of solutions. Here's the bottom line. If you truly care about fiscal responsibility, you have to address spending. You can't just focus on taxes. You can't keep expanding programs, increasing obligations, and then act surprised when the numbers don't add up. And let's not ignore one key moment in that hearing. The acknowledgement that voters already had their say. There was a reference to the election as a referendum. That matters, because at the end of the day, policy direction is supposed to reflect what the people voted for, not what politicians wish they had voted for. What we're seeing right now is a clash between two fundamentally different visions of how the country should be run. One believes in bigger government, more redistribution, and more control. The other believes in lower taxes, economic freedom, and individual opportunity. At Freedom Forge, we're not here to just repeat talking points. We're here to cut through the noise. And the truth is, you can't tax your way into prosperity, and you definitely can't spend your way out of debt. If this hearing showed us anything, it's that the real issue isn't just policy, it's priorities. Are we going to keep growing government? Or are we going to start putting the American people and economic reality first? Let me know what you think in the comments. Do you believe tax cuts help or hurt the economy? And do you think Washington is actually serious about reducing the national debt? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. This is Freedom Forge, and we're just getting started.